Sophia Chen had everything a girl could want. Designer clothes filled her walk-in closet. Her car was brand new and expensive. She lived in a mansion with more rooms than she could count. Her parents were wealthy beyond measure, and everyone in their social circle knew the Chen name. She was beautiful, educated, and every young man from prominent families wanted to marry her. But Sophia had one problem. She was spoiled and she knew it. Worse, she didn't care. The trouble started at the Riverside Country Club Gala. It was one of those fancy events where rich people gathered to show off their wealth and make business deals over champagne. Sophia wore a stunning red dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her mother had spent weeks planning every detail of that evening. You see, her parents had arranged for her to meet Richard Zhang, the son of their longtime business partner. The two families had decided that Sophia and Richard would make a perfect match. They would merge their fortunes, strengthen their business ties, and create a powerful alliance. It was all planned out, neat and tidy like a business transaction. But nobody had asked Sophia what she wanted. When Richard approached her that evening, confidence radiating from every pore, Sophia felt something snap inside her. He wasn't a bad person, really. He was handsome enough, well-educated, and came from the right family. But he was also arrogant, entitled, and talked about himself constantly. He assumed she would be grateful for his attention. He was wrong. In front of 300 guests, including both families and the city's most influential people, Sophia did the unthinkable. When Richard tried to place his arm around her waist for a photo, she stepped away and spoke loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "I'm sorry, but I'm not interested in being sold off like a piece of property," she said, her voice cutting through the polite dinner conversation. "I don't care how much money your family has or what business deals our parents want to make. I'm not marrying you or anyone else they choose for me." The silence that followed was deafening. Glasses stopped clinking. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every eye in the room turned to watch the drama unfold. Richard's face turned bright red. His father stood up, anger flashing in his eyes. Sophia's mother looked like she might faint. Her father, however, remained perfectly still. His face was calm, but Sophia knew that look. It was the expression he wore when he was truly, deeply angry. The kind of anger that didn't explode but instead calculated consequences. The ride home that night was silent. Sophia sat in the back seat, her heart pounding but her chin held high. She had meant every word. She was tired of being treated like a prize to be won or a tool to be used. If standing up for herself meant facing her father's anger, so be it. She expected yelling. She expected punishment. Maybe they would take away her credit cards or ground her like she was a teenager again. What she didn't expect was what came next. 3 days later, her father called her into his study. He sat behind his massive oak desk looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Disappointment, maybe. Or perhaps something else. "Sophia," he began, his voice measured and calm. "You made your feelings very clear at the gala. You don't want to be told who to marry. You want to make your own choices?" "Yes," she said, trying to match his calm tone. "I do. Very well. Then I'm going to let you make a choice right now." Sophia felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he understood. Maybe he was finally going to let her live her own life. "You can marry the man I've chosen for you," her father continued. "Or you can leave this house, lose access to your trust fund, and make your own way in the world with nothing but the education we've given you." The hope died instantly. This wasn't a choice. It was an ultimatum. "That's not fair," Sophia protested. "Life isn't fair," her father replied. "You've lived a privileged life, Sophia. You've never wanted for anything, but you've also never earned anything. You've never struggled, never sacrificed, never learned the value of what you have. It's time you learned those lessons. By forcing me into a marriage I don't want?" "No," her father said, and now she saw something different in his eyes. Not anger, purpose. "By sending you somewhere you can learn what truly matters. I've arranged a marriage for you. His name is Daniel Morrison. He's a farmer from Cedar Valley, about 6 hours from here." Sophia stared at him in disbelief. "A farmer? You're joking, I'm not. The wedding is in 2 weeks. You'll move to his farm immediately after. You'll live there for at least 1 year. After that, if you still want to leave, you may. But until then, this is not negotiable." "You can't do this," Sophia shouted, jumping to her feet. "I can and I have," her father said simply. "The papers are already signed. Daniel has agreed to the arrangement. This is your punishment for embarrassing this family and showing such disrespect. Perhaps living a simpler life will teach you gratitude and humility. Sophia tried everything. She begged. She cried. She threatened. She appealed to her mother, who only shook her head sadly and said, "Your father has made his decision." She even considered running away, but where would she go? She had no job skills, no real friends who would help her defy her father, and no money of her own. The wedding was small and cold. No fancy gala, no hundreds of guests, just a quick ceremony at City Hall with her parents as witnesses. Daniel Morrison stood beside her, quiet and serious. He was tall, with sun-darkened skin and rough hands. He wore a simple suit that looked uncomfortable on his frame. He said his vows in a low voice, and Sophia barely whispered hers. When it was over, he nodded to her parents respectfully and gestured toward an old pickup truck parked outside. "Ready?" he asked simply. Sophia looked back at her parents one last time, hoping they would change their minds. Her mother had tears in her eyes, but her father's expression remained firm. This was really happening. She climbed into the truck, her designer luggage barely fitting in the back. As they drove away from the city, away from everything she knew, Sophia stared out the window and tried not to cry. The drive took 6 hours. Daniel didn't talk much. He asked if she was comfortable, if she needed to stop, if she was hungry. His courtesy was polite but distant. He was a stranger, and now he was her husband. As they left the highway and drove down increasingly rural roads, Sophia felt her heart sinking lower and lower. The houses became smaller and farther apart. Paved roads turned to gravel. The landscape was nothing but fields and forests. Finally, they turned down a long dirt driveway. At the end sat a small farmhouse. It was old but looked well maintained. There was a barn behind it, some outbuildings, and fields stretching as far as she could see. Daniel parked the truck and got out, grabbing her luggage. "Welcome home," he said quietly. Sophia stood in the dirt driveway, her expensive heels sinking into the soft ground. She looked at the modest house, the old truck, the endless fields. Her phone had no signal. There were no shops, no restaurants, no coffee places anywhere in sight. The nearest neighbor was probably miles away. This was her punishment. This was her new life, and she had never felt more alone. Daniel carried her bags inside and showed her to a small bedroom. "You can rest," he said. "I need to finish the evening chores. There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry." Then he left, and Sophia sat on the simple bed in her designer dress, surrounded by luggage full of clothes that had no purpose here, and finally let herself cry. She had lost everything. Her comfortable life, her freedom, her future, all because she had dared to speak up for herself. And now she was trapped on a farm with a stranger, sentenced to a year of this simple, backward life as punishment for her pride. If only she had known then what she would discover in the months to come. If only she had realized that this punishment would become something else entirely. But sitting there that first night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the countryside, all Sophia could think about was surviving until she could escape. Her real education was about to begin. The rooster woke Sophia at 5 in the morning. She had never heard such a horrible sound in her life. Back home, she usually slept until 9 or 10, waking up slowly to soft music from her phone. Here, the rooster screamed like it was being murdered, and it wouldn't stop. She groaned and pulled the pillow over her head, but it was useless. Then she heard other sounds. Footsteps downstairs. The creak of the front door. The rumble of the truck starting up. Daniel was already awake and working. Sophia finally dragged herself out of bed around 7. She had hardly slept. The bed was too firm, the room too quiet, and her mind wouldn't stop racing. She put on the most casual clothes she had brought, which were still far too fancy for a farm. Her white designer jeans and silk blouse looked ridiculous here. When she went downstairs, Daniel was already back, sitting at the kitchen table with coffee and what looked like account books. He glanced up when she entered. "Morning," he said. "Coffee's in the pot. Cups are in the cabinet above the sink." Sophia poured herself a cup, grateful for the familiar ritual. The coffee was strong and black. She usually added cream and sugar, but she didn't want to ask where they were. "I fed the chickens and checked the cattle," Daniel said, going back to his books. "I'll be working the north field today. There's food in the fridge if you're hungry." Then he stood up, put his cup in the sink, and headed for the door. "Wait," Sophia called out. "What am I supposed to do?" Daniel paused and looked back at her. His expression wasn't unkind, but it wasn't particularly warm either. "Whatever you want. This is your home now, too." Then he was gone, and Sophia was alone in the strange house. The first few days were the worst of her life. She tried to cook and nearly burned down the kitchen. She had never actually cooked before. At home, they had a chef. At college, she ate out or ordered delivery. She didn't even know how to properly crack an egg. Her first attempt at breakfast resulted in burned toast, rubbery eggs, and a smoke alarm that wouldn't stop screaming. Daniel came running in from the barn thinking there was a real fire. When he saw the disaster in the kitchen, he just sighed, opened the windows, and helped her clean up. "Never cooked before?" he asked. Sophia shook her head, feeling humiliated. "All right," he said. "I'll show you some basics tonight." He didn't laugh at her or make her feel stupid. He just stated it as a fact and moved on. Somehow that made Sophia feel even worse. She tried to do laundry and turned all of Daniel's white work shirts pink. She had thrown in a red dress without thinking about it. When Daniel saw them hanging on the line later, he just looked at them for a long moment. "I'm sorry," Sophia said quickly. "I didn't know." "I'll buy you new ones." "It's fine," Daniel said. "They're just work shirts." "Pink's not my color, but they'll do." He wore those pink shirts to work for the next week without complaint. Sophia felt guilty every time she saw them. The physical work was even harder. Sophia had been to gyms with personal trainers, done yoga classes, even tried Pilates. But actual farm work was completely different. Her muscles ached in places she didn't know she had muscles. Her hands developed blisters from trying to help with simple tasks. One afternoon, she decided to collect eggs from the hen house. It seemed simple enough. But the chickens were mean and aggressive. They pecked at her hands and flapped their wings in her face. She came back to the house with only 3 eggs and tears of frustration in her eyes. Daniel was fixing a fence nearby and saw her struggling. He didn't say anything critical. He just showed her how to move calmly around the chickens, how to reach under them without startling them, how to handle them with confidence instead of fear. "They can sense nervousness," he explained. "Just be calm and firm. They're just chickens, not monsters." The next day, Sophia managed to collect a dozen eggs without getting pecked once. It was a small victory, but it felt huge. Slowly, painfully, Sophia began to adapt. She learned to wake up early even though she hated it. She learned to cook simple meals by watching online videos on the spotty internet connection. She learned to do laundry properly, to clean effectively, to handle basic farm tasks without completely failing. But more than the skills, she started noticing other things. Things about Daniel. Things about this life. Daniel worked harder than anyone she had ever known. He was up before dawn and often didn't finish until after sunset. He repaired fences, tended animals, maintained equipment, planned crop rotations, managed accounts, and did 100 other tasks that Sophia had never even considered. And he did it all without complaining. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words were thoughtful and deliberate. He wasn't trying to impress anyone or prove anything. He just did what needed to be done. One evening, Sophia heard a knock on the door. An elderly woman stood there looking worried. "Is Daniel home?" she asked. "My tractor broke down in the middle of the field and I can't get it started." Daniel immediately grabbed his tools and followed her. Sophia watched from the window as he spent 3 hours in the fading light, fixing the woman's tractor. When he came back covered in grease and dirt, Sophia asked if the woman had paid him. "Pay me?" Daniel looked confused. "Mrs. Henderson is our neighbor. Her husband died last year. She's trying to keep their farm running by herself. Of course I'm not going to charge her." Sophia thought about the wealthy families she knew back home. They wouldn't cross the street to help someone unless there was something in it for them. Yet here was Daniel, giving up his evening to help a neighbor for free. Another day, Sophia watched Daniel spend an hour patiently teaching a teenage boy from a nearby farm how to fix an irrigation system. The boy was struggling and frustrated, but Daniel never lost patience. He explained things clearly, let the boy make mistakes, and praised him when he finally got it right. "That was nice of you," Sophia commented later. Daniel shrugged. "Someone taught me once. Now I pass it on. That's how it works out here." The more Sophia observed, the more she realized that everything she thought she knew about value and worth was backward. Back in her old world, people were measured by their bank accounts, their connections, their possessions. Here, people were measured by their character, their reliability, their willingness to help, and by those measures, Daniel was far wealthier than anyone she had ever known. There was a terrible storm one night. The wind howled like a living thing, and rain hammered against the windows. Sophia was terrified, huddled in her bed when she heard Daniel moving around downstairs. She found him pulling on his rain gear. "Where are you going?" she asked. "It's dangerous out there. The animals are scared," he said. "And I need to secure some equipment before it gets damaged. The north field tends to flood. I need to make sure the drainage is clear. You're going out in this?" He looked at her like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "The work doesn't stop because of weather, Sophia. The animals depend on me. The crops depend on me. That's what responsibility means." She watched him disappear into the storm and suddenly felt ashamed. She had complained about everything here. The early mornings, the hard work, the simple life. But Daniel never complained. He just did what needed to be done day after day without recognition or reward. On impulse, Sophia grabbed a rain jacket and followed him outside. The wind nearly knocked her over and the rain was so heavy she could barely see. But she found Daniel in the barn, calming the frightened animals with soft words and gentle hands. "What are you doing here?" he shouted over the storm. "Helping," she shouted back. For the first time since she had arrived, Daniel smiled at her. It was a small smile, but genuine. "All right then. Help me get these horses settled. Talk to them calmly. Let them know everything's okay." They worked together through the night. Sophia's clothes were soaked through, her hair plastered to her head, her muscles screaming with exhaustion. But when the storm finally passed and the animals were safe and calm, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt useful. She felt capable. She felt like she had actually accomplished something meaningful. As they walked back to the house in the gray dawn light, Daniel spoke quietly. "You did good tonight." 3 simple words, but they meant more to Sophia than any compliment she had ever received at a fancy party. Over the following weeks, Sophia stopped seeing the farm as a prison. She started seeing it as a challenge. Every new skill she learned, every task she completed successfully, felt like a small victory. She was changing and she could feel it. Her hands were calloused now. Her designer clothes stayed in the closet, replaced by practical jeans and simple shirts. She woke up with the rooster without cursing anymore. She cooked meals that were actually edible. She collected eggs without fear. She even helped Daniel with some of the lighter farm work. And somewhere along the way, she started looking at Daniel differently too, not as her jailer or the instrument of her punishment, but as a person, a good person, a strong, principled, hard-working man who treated everyone with respect and dignity. She noticed the way he was patient with her mistakes, the way he protected the animals in his care, the way he helped neighbors without expecting anything in return, the way he worked with integrity even when no one was watching. The wealthy men she had known back home suddenly seemed small and shallow in comparison. One evening, they sat on the porch after dinner, watching the sunset paint the fields golden. It was peaceful in a way Sophia had never experienced before. No traffic noise, no crowds, no constant stimulation, just the quiet beauty of the land. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia said. "Sure. Why did you agree to marry me? My father must have told you this was a punishment, that I didn't want to be here." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "He did tell me, but he also told me you had potential you hadn't discovered yet. He thought you needed a chance to find out who you really were, away from all the noise and expectations. And you believed him. I trusted his judgment. And I figured everyone deserves a chance to grow." Sophia thought about that. Her father hadn't just punished her. He had given her an opportunity, even if she couldn't see it at the time. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for being patient with me, for teaching me, for not giving up on me even when I was awful those first few weeks." Daniel looked at her, and in the fading light she saw respect in his eyes. "You weren't awful. You were just scared and out of your element, but you didn't quit. That says a lot about your character." As the stars began to appear, Sophia realized something startling. She didn't hate it here anymore. In fact, she was starting to like it, and she was definitely starting to like the quiet, strong man sitting beside her. Her punishment was becoming something else entirely. She just didn't know yet how much her life was about to change. 3. Months into her new life, Sophia had finally found a rhythm on the farm. She could cook decent meals, manage the household, and even help with some of the lighter farm work. She wasn't great at everything, but she was learning. More importantly, she had stopped feeling sorry for herself. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Daniel left early to check on the cattle in the far pasture. Sophia made breakfast and was cleaning up when she heard the sound of vehicles coming up the driveway. Lots of vehicles. She looked out the window and froze. 3 black SUVs and 2 expensive sedans were pulling up to the house. These weren't the old pickup trucks that neighbors drove. These were the kind of vehicles that wealthy business people used. Her first thought was that her father had sent someone to check on her. Her stomach twisted with anxiety. She wasn't ready to face her old world yet. But when the car doors opened, the men who stepped out weren't her father's people. They were strangers in expensive suits carrying briefcases and rolled-up documents. They looked completely out of place against the backdrop of the simple farmhouse. The lead man, silver-haired and professional, knocked on the door. Sophia answered nervously. "Good morning," he said politely. "We're here to see Daniel Morrison. Is he available?"
"He's out in the fields," Sophia replied.
"Can I help you with something?" "We have a scheduled meeting about the quarterly reports and the Eastern property expansion," the man explained, as if this should make perfect sense. Sophia stared at him blankly. "I'm sorry, what?" Before he could answer, she heard Daniel's truck coming up the driveway. He parked and walked over, seemingly unsurprised to see the convoy of expensive vehicles. "Gentlemen," he greeted them with a nod. "You're early. Give me a few minutes to clean up and we can talk in the barn office." "Barn office?" one of the younger men asked, looking around skeptically. "The house is my wife's space," Daniel said simply. "We do business in the office." He disappeared inside to wash up, leaving Sophia standing there with a dozen questions and no answers. When Daniel came back out, he had changed into clean jeans and a button-down shirt. He still looked like a farmer, but somehow he also looked like someone in charge. "Sophia," he said, "I'll be in meetings for a few hours. These gentlemen will need coffee and probably lunch around noon." Then he led the entire group toward what Sophia had thought was just a storage barn. She stood there, confused and curious. Coffee she could handle, but who were these people? And what kind of quarterly reports did a small farmer need? Unable to contain her curiosity, Sophia made a pot of coffee and brought it out to the barn. She had never been inside this particular building. Daniel always said it was just for equipment and paperwork. But when she opened the door, her jaw dropped. The inside had been completely renovated. There was a proper office with a large conference table, computers, filing cabinets, and walls covered with maps and charts. The men in suits were seated around the table with Daniel at the head, spreading out documents and pointing to various papers. "Coffee," Sophia announced, trying not to show her shock. "Thank you," Daniel said, barely looking up from a spreadsheet. Sophia set down the tray, but instead of leaving immediately, she glanced at the documents on the table. What she saw made no sense. These weren't plans for a small family farm. These were detailed maps showing hundreds, maybe thousands of acres, property surveys, crop yield analyses, financial reports with numbers that had way too many zeros. One of the men was explaining something about irrigation expansion on the western section. Another was discussing a contract with a major food distribution company. A third was presenting data about sustainable farming practices and environmental impact studies. This wasn't a meeting about a small farm. This was a meeting about a major agricultural operation. Sophia quietly left and went back to the house, her mind spinning. She tried to focus on making lunch, but she kept thinking about what she had seen. The maps, the numbers, the way those businessmen treated Daniel with obvious respect and deference. At noon, she brought sandwiches and more coffee to the barn office. This time, she paid closer attention to the conversation. "The Morrison property continues to be one of the most productive in the region," one man was saying. "The soil quality is exceptional, and your sustainable practices are actually increasing value year over year." "What about the Miller-adjacent property?" Daniel asked, pointing to a section on the map. "They've agreed to sell. That would add another 800 acres to your holdings, bringing the total to just over 5,000 acres. Sophia nearly dropped the sandwich tray. 5,000 acres? She must have made a sound because Daniel looked up and caught her eye. For a moment, their gazes held. Then he simply nodded his thanks for the lunch and went back to the meeting. Sophia walked back to the house in a daze. 5,000 acres. The numbers on those financial reports. The professional team. The sophisticated operation. This wasn't a poor farmer. This wasn't even a comfortable middle-class farmer. This was serious wealth. She spent the rest of the afternoon in turmoil. Had Daniel been lying to her this whole time? Had her father been lying? Was this all some elaborate test or joke? When the meetings finally ended and the convoy of vehicles drove away, Sophia was waiting on the porch. Daniel walked over looking tired but satisfied. "Good meetings?" she asked, her voice tight. "Productive," he replied. "Thanks for the coffee and lunch." "Daniel," Sophia said, standing up. "We need to talk." He must have heard something in her tone because he stopped and gave her his full attention. "All right, who are you really?" The question came out more accusatory than she intended. "Those men, those reports, those maps. 5,000 acres? That's not a small farm. That's not what you showed me." Daniel was quiet for a moment, then gestured to the porch chairs. "Sit down. I'll explain." They sat and Daniel leaned back looking out at the fields as he spoke. "Everything I showed you was real, Sophia. This farmhouse, the daily work, the way we live, none of that was a lie. But you own 5,000 acres. You have business managers and quarterly reports. My family has owned this land for 4 generations, Daniel explained. My great-grandfather bought the first 100 acres. Each generation added to it, worked it, and passed it down. By the time it came to me, it was already substantial. I've added to it over the years." "So you're rich," Sophia said flatly. "I have assets," Daniel corrected. "Land, equipment, resources. But I don't live like a rich person and I never wanted to. Why not? Why live in this small house and do all the hard work yourself when you could afford to hire people? You could live in a mansion. You could have staff." Daniel turned to look at her directly. "Because that's not the point of wealth, Sophia. My great-grandfather taught my grandfather, who taught my father, who taught me that land is a responsibility, not just an asset. You don't own land. You steward it. You take care of it so you can pass it on to the next generation better than you received it. But the way you live," Sophia protested. "The old truck, the simple house, doing your own work." "I do hire help when it's needed," Daniel said. "During harvest, during planting, for major projects. But I don't hire people to live my life for me. I don't need a mansion. This house is comfortable. I don't need a fancy car. The truck works fine. And I like the work. It keeps me connected to the land, to the purpose of what I'm doing." Sophia shook her head, trying to process this. "My father knew, didn't he? He knew exactly who you were when he sent me here." "Yes," Daniel confirmed. "Your father and I met several years ago at an agricultural investment conference. We've done some business together." "He's a smart man, Sophia." "He knew what he was doing when he arranged this marriage? But why?" Sophia asked, feeling confused and a little angry. "Why agree to marry someone who didn't want to be here? Why go along with this weird punishment scheme?" Daniel stood up and walked to the porch railing, looking out at the sunset painting the fields gold and orange. "Your father told me about you. Not just the spoiled privilege parts, but the potential he saw that you couldn't see yourself. He said you were smart, capable, and strong, but you'd never had a chance to discover that because everything had always been handed to you." He turned back to face her. "I agreed because I was curious if he was right. And because I thought if you could learn to see value in things beyond money and status, you might become someone worth knowing." "So this was all a test?" Sophia felt her anger rising. "You were testing me?" "Life is a test, Sophia," Daniel said calmly. "Every day. I wasn't testing you. I was giving you an opportunity. To learn, to grow, to discover who you are when nobody's watching and nobody's keeping score. By lying to me, I never lied. You assumed I was poor because I live simply. You assumed the farm was small because the house is modest. You assumed I was just a simple farmer because I dress in work clothes and drive an old truck. But I never said any of those things. You saw what you expected to see." Sophia wanted to argue, but she realized he was right. She had made assumptions based on appearances. Just like people back home had made assumptions about her based on her designer clothes and expensive car. "So what now?" she asked quietly. "Now that I know the truth?" Daniel came back and sat down beside her. "Now nothing changes. The work still needs to be done. The animals still need to be fed. The land still needs to be cared for. Money doesn't change any of that. But everything changes," Sophia insisted. "You're not who I thought you were. Who did you think I was?" Sophia struggled to find the words. Someone real, someone genuine, someone who lived by principles instead of privilege. "And now? Now I don't know." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's fair. Take your time to think about it. But Sophia, ask yourself this. Has the way I treat people changed now that you know? Have my values changed? Does knowing I have money make the work I do less meaningful, or the help I give neighbors less genuine? Sophia sat in silence thinking. She remembered Daniel fixing Mrs. Henderson's tractor for free, teaching that teenage boy about irrigation, working through the storm to protect the animals, being patient with her mistakes. None of those actions had anything to do with money. No, she finally admitted. You're still the same person, exactly. Wealth is just a number on paper. It's what you do with it that matters. I could live in a mansion and hire people to do everything while I sit around counting my money. Or I can live here, work the land, be part of the community, and use what I have to help others and protect something worth protecting. That's my choice. As the last light faded from the sky, Sophia felt something shift inside her. Daniel wasn't less genuine because he had money. If anything, he was more impressive. He had chosen this life when he could have chosen luxury and ease. I need to think, Sophia said. Take all the time you need, Daniel replied. That night, Sophia lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Everything she thought she knew had been turned upside down. But as she replayed the last 3 months in her mind, she realized something important. She had been happier here, doing real work and learning real skills, than she had ever been in her mansion with all her designer clothes and fancy parties. And Daniel, with all his wealth hidden behind simplicity and hard work, was more of a man than anyone she had ever known. The question was, what was she going to do about it? For 3 days after the revelation, Sophia barely spoke to Daniel. Not out of anger exactly, but because she needed time to process everything. She went through her daily routines mechanically, her mind constantly churning through what she had learned. Daniel gave her space. He didn't push her to talk or explain himself further. He just continued with his work, patient as always. On the 4th morning, Sophia woke up with a new clarity. She had been asking herself the wrong questions. It didn't matter that Daniel had money. What mattered was what kind of person he was, and she already knew that. She had learned it over the past 3 months by watching him live his values every single day. She found him in the barn, repairing a piece of equipment. "Can I help?" she asked. Daniel looked up, surprised. "Sure. Hand me that wrench." They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Sophia spoke. "I'm sorry I've been distant. You had a lot to think about," Daniel said, not looking up from his work. "I understand. I've been thinking about what you said, about how you choose to live. And I think I understand now." Sophia sat down on a nearby hay bale. "Back home, everyone I knew measured success by how much they could show off. The bigger house, the fancier car, the more expensive clothes. But you measure it differently." "How do you think I measure it?" Daniel asked, genuinely curious. "By what you build, not what you buy. By who you help, not who you impress. By whether you're living according to your values, not other people's expectations." Daniel stopped working and looked at her. There was something in his eyes that Sophia hadn't seen before. Respect, maybe? Or recognition. "That's exactly right," he said quietly. "I want to learn more," Sophia said suddenly. "Not just the daily tasks. I want to understand the whole operation, the business side, the planning. All of it." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because I'm your wife," Sophia said, and for the first time she didn't feel resentful saying those words. "And because I'm tired of just surviving here. I want to contribute something meaningful." A slow smile spread across Daniel's face. "All right then. Let's start your real education." Over the next few months, Daniel taught Sophia everything about running a large agricultural operation. She learned about crop rotation, soil management, water rights, and sustainable farming practices. She sat in on business meetings and asked questions until she understood every detail. She discovered she had a mind for strategy and organization. While Daniel understood the land and the physical work intimately, Sophia saw opportunities he hadn't considered. She suggested they create a direct-to-consumer brand, selling their produce to high-end restaurants and specialty markets. "People want to know where their food comes from," she explained, pulling up research on her laptop. "They want organic, sustainable, local. We have all of that. We just need to market it properly." Daniel was skeptical at first. "We already have distribution contracts, which lock us into low prices," Sophia countered. "If we build our own brand, we control the pricing and the relationships. Plus, we can charge premium prices for premium quality." She threw herself into the project with the same intensity she had once devoted to shopping and parties. But this felt different. This felt purposeful. Sophia reached out to contacts from her old life, high-end restaurants owned by people she had met at social events. But now, instead of talking about fashion and gossip, she talked about sustainable agriculture, soil health, and farm-to-table quality. To her surprise, they listened. Her name and connections, which she had resented being valued for, actually opened doors. But this time, she was selling something real, something she had helped build. Within 2 months, they had contracts with 5 upscale restaurants in the city. Within 4 months, they had a waiting list. Sophia designed a logo, created marketing materials, and managed the entire customer relationship side of the business. She worked harder than she ever had in her life, but she loved it. Every morning when she woke up, she had purpose. She was building something real alongside someone who respected her contributions. And somewhere in all of that, something else was happening. She was falling in love with her husband. It happened gradually in small moments. The way Daniel listened to her ideas with genuine interest. The way he trusted her with important decisions. The way he smiled when she successfully closed a new deal. The way he still got up before dawn to do the physical work, even though he had managers he could delegate to. One evening, they were sitting in the barn office reviewing the quarterly numbers. Sophia looked up from the spreadsheet and found Daniel watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You're amazing," he said simply. "The work you've done with the direct sales program. The relationships you've built. You've increased our revenue by 30% in 4 months." Sophia felt her face warm. "It's just using the resources we already had more effectively." "It's more than that," Daniel said. "You took something you used to resent, your background and connections, and turned them into tools to build something meaningful. That takes creativity and courage." Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary. Sophia felt her heart beat faster. When had she started noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled? When had she started looking forward to their evening strategy sessions? "We make a good team," she said quietly. "Yeah," Daniel agreed. "We do." The moment stretched between them, full of things unsaid. Then Daniel's phone rang, breaking the spell. He answered it, and the moment passed, but something had shifted. They both felt it. The next week, Sophia got a call from her mother. It was the first time they had spoken in months. "Darling," her mother's voice sounded strained. "How are you?" "I'm good, Mom, really good. Your father and I were hoping you might come visit, just for a weekend. We miss you." Sophia hesitated. Part of her wasn't ready to face her old world yet, but another part was curious to see it again through her new eyes. "Can I bring Daniel?" she asked. There was a pause. "Of course. We'd love to meet him properly." After she hung up, Sophia found Daniel in the equipment shed. "My parents want us to visit next weekend." Daniel looked up from the tractor he was maintaining. "How do you feel about that?" "Nervous," Sophia admitted. "That world feels like it belongs to a different person now. But I think I'm ready to face it." "Then we'll go," Daniel said simply. Together. The word together made Sophia's heart lift. They were a team now, partners. And maybe, hopefully, they were becoming something more. That Saturday, they drove to the city in Daniel's truck. Sophia had offered to rent a luxury car, but Daniel refused. "We go as ourselves," he said. "No pretending." Sophia wore a simple but elegant dress. Daniel wore clean jeans and a nice shirt. They looked like exactly what they were, hard-working people who had nothing to prove. When they arrived at her parents' mansion, her mother answered the door. She looked at Sophia for a long moment, then pulled her into a tight embrace. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered. "You look so different, so healthy and strong." Her father appeared behind her mother. His expression was carefully neutral, but Sophia saw something in his eyes. He was evaluating her, measuring whether his plan had worked. "Hello, Father," Sophia said, standing straighter. "Sophia." He nodded, then extended his hand to Daniel. "Daniel, good to see you again." They went inside, and Sophia felt like she was walking through a museum of her old life. Everything was exactly as she remembered, but it all seemed different now. Smaller somehow. Less important. At dinner, her parents asked questions. Not about the hardship or whether she was ready to come home, but about the farm, the work, the business. Sophia found herself talking enthusiastically about crop yields, sustainable practices, and their direct-to-consumer program. She showed them the logo she had designed, the marketing materials, the contracts they had secured. Her father listened intently. When she finished, he sat back with a slight smile. "You've found your purpose," he said. "I have," Sophia agreed. Then she looked him directly in the eye. "You knew, didn't you? From the beginning. You knew Daniel wasn't poor. You knew exactly what you were doing. Her father didn't deny it. I knew you were smart and capable, but you'd never had a reason to discover that. You needed to be somewhere where your name and money meant nothing, where you had to prove yourself through work and character." "That was manipulative," Sophia said, but there was no real anger in her voice. "It was a father's desperate attempt to save his daughter from a wasted life," he replied. "Are you angry?" Sophia thought about it. 3 months ago, she would have been furious. But now, sitting here with calloused hands and genuine accomplishments to be proud of, she felt something else. "No," she said finally. "I'm grateful." Her mother wiped tears from her eyes. Her father nodded, satisfied. "And Daniel?" her father asked. "How is the arrangement working?" Sophia glanced at Daniel, who had been quiet through most of the dinner. He caught her eye and gave her a small, encouraging smile. "It's working," Sophia said softly. "Better than I ever expected." After dinner, Sophia's parents went to bed, leaving her and Daniel alone in the massive living room. They stood by the window looking out at the city lights. "This was your world," Daniel said. "It was," Sophia agreed. "But it's not anymore. My world is 5,000 acres of farmland, a barn office, and chicken coops. And honestly, I prefer it." Daniel turned to look at her. "Sophia, I need to tell you something." Her heart started racing. "What?" "When your father first proposed this arrangement, I agreed partly out of curiosity, partly because I respected his judgment. But I never expected—" He paused, searching for words. "I never expected you. What do you mean?" "I mean the real you. The woman who didn't give up even when everything was hard, who learned to work with her hands and wasn't afraid to fail, who took her privileged background and turned it into something useful instead of something to be ashamed of, who works harder than anyone I've ever met to prove herself." Sophia's breath caught. "Daniel, I'm falling in love with you," he said quietly. "And I wanted you to know that. No pressure, no expectations, just the truth." For a moment, Sophia couldn't speak. Then she smiled, a genuine, joyful smile that came from deep in her heart. "That's good," she whispered, "because I'm already in love with you." Daniel's face lit up like sunrise over the fields. He reached for her hand and she gave it willingly. Standing there in her old world, Sophia realized she had found her real home. Not in a mansion or on a farm, but with the person who had helped her discover who she truly was. Her punishment had become her salvation. And tomorrow, they would drive back to the farm together, as partners, as equals, and as two people who had chosen each other for all the right reasons. The drive back to the farm the next morning felt different. Sophia sat closer to Daniel in the truck, their hands intertwined on the seat between them. Everything had changed overnight, yet somehow it all felt perfectly natural, like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. "No regrets about last night?" Daniel asked as they left the city behind. Sophia laughed. "About finally admitting I love my husband? No regrets at all." He squeezed her hand and smiled. It was a smile she had earned over months of hard work and genuine growth, and it meant more to her than any expensive gift ever had. 6 months passed like a beautiful dream. Sophia and Daniel's relationship deepened as they worked side by side, building their life together. The farm flourished under their combined efforts. Sophia's marketing genius paired with Daniel's agricultural expertise created something special. Their brand, Morrison Heritage Farm, became known throughout the region for quality and sustainability. They expanded carefully, always staying true to their values of environmental stewardship and community support. But Sophia's transformation wasn't finished yet. One morning, she received an unexpected phone call. "Sophia Chen Morrison?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, this is she. This is Victoria Klein from the Regional Women in Business Association. We're hosting our annual gala next month, and we'd like to honor you as one of our Rising Entrepreneurs of the Year." Sophia nearly dropped the phone. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your work transforming Morrison Heritage Farm's business model has been remarkable. You've created jobs, promoted sustainable agriculture, and built a successful direct-to-consumer brand. We'd love to feature your story." After she hung up, Sophia sat in stunned silence. Then she started laughing. A year ago, she had been honored at galas for wearing the right dress and knowing the right people. Now she was being honored for actual accomplishments. What's so funny? Daniel asked, coming in from the morning chores. She told him about the call. His face broke into a proud grin. That's amazing, Sophia. You deserve it. Will you come with me? To the gala? Wouldn't miss it. The gala was held at the Grand Sterling Hotel, the same place where Sophia had once rejected Richard Jang and set this whole journey in motion. Walking back into that ballroom felt surreal, but this time everything was different. Sophia wore a beautiful dress, but her confidence didn't come from the designer label. It came from knowing who she was and what she had built. Her hands had faint calluses that no amount of lotion could completely hide, and she wasn't ashamed of them. They were proof of her hard work. Daniel walked beside her in a well-fitted suit, looking handsome and confident. He didn't belong to this world, but he didn't need to. He was comfortable in his own skin, and that made him more impressive than anyone else in the room. As they entered, Sophia saw familiar faces. People from her old life, from her parents' social circle. The whisper started immediately. She could imagine what they were saying. That's Sophia Chen. Remember when her father sent her away? She married a farmer. Can you imagine? Let them talk. She didn't care anymore. Then she saw him, Richard Jung, the man she had rejected a year ago, standing near the bar with a group of young executives. He noticed her at the same moment, and his eyes widened in recognition. He walked over, his expression curious. Sophia, is that really you? Hello, Richard, she said calmly. He looked her up and down, clearly confused by what he saw. She looked different, healthier, stronger, more confident. I heard you got married. To a farmer? I did, Sophia said, pulling Daniel closer. Richard, this is my husband, Daniel Morrison. Daniel, this is Richard Jang. The two men shook hands. Richard was dressed impeccably in an expensive designer suit, every detail calculated to impress. But next to Daniel's quiet confidence, he somehow looked smaller. So, farming, Richard said with barely concealed condescension. That must be quite an adjustment from your old lifestyle. It was, Sophia agreed cheerfully. Best thing that ever happened to me. Richard laughed uncomfortably, not sure if she was joking. Well, I'm sure it's nice, but don't you miss the city? The culture, the opportunities? I create my own opportunities now, Sophia said. Actually, that's why I'm here tonight. I'm receiving an award for entrepreneurship. Richard's smile faltered. An award? Before Sophia could respond, Victoria Klein appeared and whisked her away to prepare for the presentation. Daniel squeezed her hand encouragingly before she left. When Sophia's name was called, she walked to the stage with her head held high. The moderator spoke about her achievements, transforming a traditional farm into a modern, sustainable business while preserving its heritage and values, about how she had created jobs in the rural community, promoted environmental stewardship, and built a brand based on quality and integrity. Sophia accepted the award and stepped to the microphone. Looking out at the crowd, she saw Daniel standing near the back, beaming with pride. She saw her parents in the front row, her mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. She saw Richard looking uncomfortable and confused. A year ago, Sophia began, I stood in a room not unlike this one and made a scene. I rejected an arranged marriage because I thought I knew what I wanted. I thought I deserved better than what was being offered to me. She paused, letting her words sink in. I was right about deserving better. I was just wrong about what better meant. I thought it meant more luxury, more status, more of the shallow things I had always known. But my father saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. He saw potential being wasted on meaningless pursuits. So he sent me away, to a farm, to a man I had never met, to a life I thought was beneath me. And I was angry. I felt punished and betrayed. Sophia smiled, her eyes finding Daniel again. But that punishment became my salvation. That farmer became my partner, my best friend, and my husband. And that life I thought was beneath me, it taught me what real value means. I learned that wealth without purpose is empty, that status without character is meaningless, that the hardest work can be the most rewarding, and that sometimes the best thing that can happen to us is having everything we thought we wanted taken away, so we can discover what we actually need. The room was completely silent, everyone hanging on her words. This award isn't just mine. It belongs to my husband, Daniel, who taught me patience and showed me what true integrity looks like. It belongs to my father, who loved me enough to let me be angry at him while I learned lessons I needed to learn. It belongs to every person in the rural community who welcomed me and taught me that value isn't measured in bank accounts but in character and contribution. To anyone here who feels lost or unsatisfied despite having everything society says you should want, I encourage you to ask yourself, what am I building? Who am I helping? What will I leave behind that matters? Because those are the questions that lead to real fulfillment. The applause started slowly, then built into a standing ovation. Sophia saw her father standing, pride evident on his face. Her mother was crying openly now. And Daniel, her wonderful Daniel, was clapping and smiling with a joy that made her heart soar. After the ceremony, people crowded around her. Former friends who had gossiped about her exile now wanted to hear her story. Business leaders asked about her farming methods and marketing strategies. Young women asked for advice about finding meaningful work. Richard approached her again as the crowd thinned. He looked humbled, perhaps for the first time in his life. "Sophia," he said quietly, "your speech was remarkable. I owe you an apology. When you rejected me that night, I was angry and embarrassed. But you were right to walk away. I wasn't offering you a partnership. I was offering you a position in a merger." Sophia appreciated his honesty. "We both learned something, Richard. I hope you find what really matters to you." He nodded and walked away, and Sophia felt only compassion for him. She understood now what it was like to be lost in a world of shallow values. Daniel appeared at her side, wrapping his arm around her waist. "Ready to go home?" "More than ready." They said goodbye to her parents. Her father embraced her tightly. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. "Not just for the award, but for who you've become." "Thank you for pushing me," Sophia replied. "Even when I hated you for it," he laughed. "That's what fathers do." As they drove home through the darkness, leaving the city lights behind once more, Sophia reflected on the incredible journey of the past year. She had gone from a spoiled, aimless girl to a woman with purpose and passion, from resenting her husband to loving him deeply, from seeing the farm as a prison to recognizing it as her true home. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked. "About how sometimes the worst punishment becomes the greatest gift. About how being sent away from everything I knew helped me find everything I needed." Daniel smiled. "No regrets?" "Not a single one," Sophia said firmly. "Well, maybe one small regret." "What's that?" "That I wasted so much time being angry instead of appreciating what I was being given. But even that taught me something valuable." As they pulled into their driveway, the farmhouse lights glowing warmly in the darkness, Sophia felt a profound sense of peace. This was her home. This land, this work, this man beside her. This was her real life, built on real values, creating real meaning. She had been punished by being sent to what she thought was a poor farmer. Instead, she had discovered that true wealth isn't measured in money or acres, but in purpose, love, and the courage to become who you're meant to be. And that was worth more than all the mansions and designer clothes in the world. The next morning, Sophia woke before the rooster, smiled at the sound that had once annoyed her so much, and got up to start another day of meaningful work, genuine partnership, and a life built on values that would last. She had everything she needed. She had everything that mattered. She had found her way home.